You know, we all have common sense as human beings to work on. We communicate using our common sense on individual matters, don't we? Problem comes between two individuals and they can use common sense to resolve their issues. You understand what I'm saying? Based on good intention. That's all you need. And neutrality. But when it comes to national issues in a government, well, the government has to deal with it. But when it comes to international disputes, of course, the international law has to be working on, has to be put on the ground, ladies and gentlemen, because international law is broken. We see what President Trump is doing, disturbing the whole world. And we're just watching the whole crisis in very tense atmosphere, state of mind, because anything can happen. I do believe this is political vulgarism. It is pure violation of international law, but as we remember, the Ethiopian, the Eritrean dispute, border dispute was settled amicably at the end of the day, after a lot of sacrifice, a lot of wars, amicably in the international court, ladies and gentlemen. But after that, the deal has to keep going. They have signed the documentation and the way it should be processed, that should be respected. Well, two people cannot settle their problems using common sense. They go to court. In the court, one will be a plaintiff, the other one will be the defense. The judge will be the neutral body that will give the final verdict at the end of the day. Here, the accused enjoys the benefit of the doubt, while the plaintiff carries the burden of proof. But with national issues, it's a different story. In this individual issue, finally a verdict is given, then an appeal follows maybe, and finally the conclusion. Put it in practice, because the verdict has been given, but two nations are fighting. Two nations have problems like Ethiopia and Eritrea. They went to the international court, and that has to be whatever the verdict was, based on what they agreed upon. It is a very interesting videos that I found I'd like to discuss with all of you. And this is very interesting to all of us, Ethiopians and Eritreans. Check it out.
In December 2000, the city of Algiers became the unlikely stage for a rare moment of hope in the Horn of Africa. After years of brutal and exhausting war, Ethiopia and Eritrea came together to sign the Algiers Agreement, watched by the world and cheered on by their weary citizens. This was more than just a ceasefire. It was a bold commitment to resolve their bitter conflict through the rule of law, not through the force of arms. At the heart of the agreement was the creation of the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission, or EEBC, an independent body tasked with settling the long-standing border dispute using colonial-era treaties and international law as its guide. For the first time, the leaders of both nations agreed to step back and let impartial legal experts, not politicians or generals, determine the fate of their contested borderlands. The Commission's mandate was unambiguous. Its decision would be final and binding, with absolutely no room for appeal, renegotiation, or political interference.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the two countries agreed upon. It will be final. No appeals. Nothing to follow after the verdict. It was final. The verdict would be given and put into the fields, into practice of demarcation. This was their agreement in front of the international observers and the international court itself. Okay.
Article 4, paragraph 15, enshrined this principle. Both nations solemnly pledged to accept the Commission's ruling, no matter how difficult or unexpected the outcome might be. This clause was the backbone of the peace process, locking the door on future disputes and ensuring that the process could not be undermined by second-guessing or political pressure. By signing, Ethiopia and Eritrea surrendered their right to challenge the verdict, placing...
It's very interesting the way they dealt with it. Really, it was cleverly managed from both sides, I believe, because close the verdict. apply the verdict and finish it off without complications. Because Bademo was not really the real issue to begin with. It's just a small village, immaterial to both countries. But the boundary had to be established by the colonial format. Ethiopia had to accept that. Eritrea had to show its territory. A lot of lawyers showed up. A lot of intellectuals showed up in here, and it was presented by writing to the UN. They agreed upon it, and the verdict was given.
Their trust and the fate of their people in the hands of international law and the global community. The logic was simple and uncompromising. If the ruling could be appealed, peace would remain elusive, and the cycle of conflict could easily reignite.
One tiny flaw ruins most grounding shoes, but grounded footwear fixed it.
That at last, the rule of law would triumph over the devastation of war and bring lasting stability to the region. The Algiers Agreement's success depended entirely on both sides' willingness to accept the referee's final whistle, no matter.
It was after the days of about 100,000 people in the war from both sides.
No matter how the decision fell. This was a test not just of diplomatic skill, but of the power of law itself to end even the most entrenched conflicts and to offer a new path forward. The stakes could not have been higher. Peace, stability, and the very future of two nations and millions of lives hung in the balance, waiting for the promise of a new beginning. The promise was clear and powerful. Accept the outcome and let the healing begin, opening the door to hope and reconciliation for generations to come. For 16 months, the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission, or EEBC, painstakingly examined colonial maps, treaties, and a mountain of legal arguments, seeking a strictly legal answer to the border question. The process was meticulous and often tense, with both sides presenting their cases in hopes of a favorable outcome. Every detail was scrutinized, from the language of old treaties to the placement of boundary markers on faded maps. In April 2002,
well, ladies and gentlemen, they presented their cases, their evidences, the values of their actually persecution in this court law of to solve the problem by law. In the international court, everything was present. Every historical analysis was given. Any political analysis was given. The maps were read. Societies. We know in this world we have too many countries separated by colonial rules. Accordingly, everything was meticulously done. Okay? Everything was clear from the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. They agreed never to revise this issue after verdict is given. The case to be closed. This is after fighting and killing each other for a long time, costing over 100,000 people from both sides. You cannot go into any higher court than the international court unless you decide to go to Saturn in a different justice system, or you invite Jesus Christ to show up in court as a judge. Ladies and gentlemen, it was assertively communicated as to what had to be presented and what was given as a result.
After months of deliberation, the Commission delivered its long-awaited verdict, a detailed 125-page decision that split disputed territories between the two nations. The ruling was comprehensive, leaving little room for ambiguity, and was intended to be final and binding. Ethiopia gained key areas like Zalambesa and Bure, but the flashpoint town of Badme, the heart of the conflict, was awarded to Eritrea, a decision that would prove deeply controversial. Initially, Ethiopia's government declared victory, signaling acceptance of the ruling and the start of border demarcation. There was cautious optimism, and officials spoke of a new era of peace and cooperation. For a brief moment, it seemed the Algiers Agreement had worked, law had delivered peace, and hope flickered on both sides of the border. But as the reality of ceding Badme set in, Ethiopian sentiment shifted. Public opinion grew uneasy, and questions about national honor and sacrifice began to dominate the conversation. The political cost of giving up a symbol of national pride became clear, sparking heated debates and protests across the country. The government's promise to accept the outcome was about to face its first real test, as leaders weighed the risks of compliance against the demands of their people. The final and binding clause, once a beacon of hope, now threatened to unravel the fragile peace.
It was sabotaged by the Ethiopians. It was sabotaged completely. In fact, the Tigrayans being a minority government in Ethiopia, you understand, they couldn't dominate Ethiopia in the political arena. Therefore, they had to find out something to extend their roots. Nothing worked. Badima was given to Eritrea. It's not because Badima was important for Ethiopia, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a little barren of land. It doesn't produce anything. It's only symbolism of sovereignty. So Ethiopians had no reason to come in here. First of all, the Amharas and the Oromos, to them, this is nothing, because it was between the Tigrayans and the Eritreans, but the Tigrayans were in power, so they had to extend their power by creating a national problem, so to say, that Badima was given to the wrong person. After they signed the document, this is the way they challenge international rule. Ladies and gentlemen, do you understand? And Eritreans had to stick with the rule. Eritreans had no other choice but stick to the rule. They signed the documentation, and the verdict was given. They had to stick with it. Therefore, it was an excuse to continue dictatorship in Ethiopia. That the Wayanes, the Ethiopian regime, accelerated some kind of tension. Ethiopians wouldn't care about Badima, but for them it was very important for survival. To the Eritreans, however, it was a point of no return, because the whole issue is closed. No return.
Casting a shadow over the future of both nations. The world watched anxiously, bracing for what would come next as the fate of the region hung in the balance. Just weeks after the EEBC's decision, Ethiopia submitted a request for interpretation, correction, and consultation. This move came swiftly, signaling that the story was far from over, and that Ethiopia was not ready to accept the outcome without further debate. On the surface, it seemed routine. Legal rulings often...
It violated its own agreement, the signature of the Prime Minister of the time. It violated it.
Need clarification. Requests like these are not uncommon in international disputes, where every word and clause can have far-reaching consequences. But Ethiopia's 14-point memorandum went further, seeking to reopen settled issues and challenge the Commission's core conclusions.
Therefore, it was not clarification, which is normal. Anybody can ask clarification after verdict is given. Okay. But Ethiopia's re-evaluation, I don't understand what it meant. I'm sure the people, civilized people sitting in the justice chairs must have been surprised. Okay, let's go. This could have been probably the first experience they faced throughout the historical mediations they performed around the world.
It was not just a request for clarity, but a calculated effort to revisit the very foundation of the ruling. Ethiopia argued that its long-standing administration of towns like Badme should outweigh colonial-era treaties.
How come though? Should it be only for Ethiopia? Is Ethiopia supposed to be having only exceptional, in exclusive manner, exceptional treatment from the world? Should she be allowed to break the rules? If she cannot acknowledge the colonial rules, why would she acknowledge the colonial boundaries between Ethiopia and Eritrea, Sudan and Ethiopia and Kenya and whatever? Why should it be special on Eritrea? Of course, the issue was something different.
They insisted that the realities on the ground, shaped by years of governance and community ties, deserved more weight than historical documents.
They probably had governed for about 20 years, maybe, by agreement with the EPLF and TPLF. Of course, when Eritrea was independent, Badima was under their control. But so what? They were fighting together. There is no historical basis for Tigrayans to claim that Badima was under their control or the control of Ethiopia for ages, for history. Because it was only an experience, not more than 20 years. Do you understand what I'm saying? Anyway, they just had to find some excuse to obstruct peace and justice and to impede the Eritrean zeal to progress, to continue living its life as an independent entity.
This was a direct challenge to the Commission's mandate to decide the border by law, not by current control. The Commission's authority rested on its ability to interpret treaties and legal principles, not to reward possession. Ethiopia was, in effect, appealing a verdict that was supposed to be unappealable. The Commission had been established to deliver a final and binding decision, leaving no room for further negotiation.
I do believe they know that, but they use the Eritrean cause always. They create crisis with the Eritreans to exit from their own internal problems, especially to extend their rules of law. Whatever it is, dictatorially or whatever they call it democracy, but I have never seen democracy in Ethiopia, to control the people by excuse, finding a way to extend oppression in Ethiopia. And then the Eritrean cause was definitely one of the things that the Ethiopian rulers, anytime they fail to do something in the country, they just bring it on the table to fight about. Here, case is closed, assertively closed.
The request was a strategic move to pressure the Commission into reconsidering its final and binding decision. Ethiopia hoped to gain leverage, or at least delay the implementation of the ruling. The EEBC now faced a dilemma: entertain the request and undermine its authority, or reject it and risk Ethiopia's withdrawal from the process altogether. Either choice carried significant risks for the fragile peace. The integrity of the entire peace process hung in the balance. Every decision now would echo far beyond the borders of Ethiopia and Eritrea. The world watched as the Commission prepared its response, aware that the next steps could shape the region's future for years to come.
Absolutely. If it had failed right here and reversed its own verdict, then the world would not have trust on this institution. I think it was just a show off, knowing that they wouldn't retreat from whatever verdict they gave, and not Eritrea would take another position. They knew this very well, but they had to use this again one more time, ladies and gentlemen, my listeners, for something, for creating, extending the war. You know, the no peace, no war environment. So you have a problem for the people to focus from or to divert their attention from their immediate problems in terms of food, security, life in general, education, health. When everything fails, you direct the direction of the people into something. You misdirect. That's exactly they use it for. Because there is no substance in here, and there will never be any substance anymore after. Abiy is trying to do his damage here. I don't understand why. The colonial issue cannot come back to Eritrea anymore. It is closed by law. For good, I'm talking about. Ethiopia is in no exit situation. In this situation, Ethiopia is in no exit situation. It cannot exit by overpowering justice that was given in the international court. And the Eritreans cannot retreat from this reality, because that would mean giving Ethiopia a chance to conquer or to do some other kind of problems, because a case is closed anyway. It is closed, so for Eritreans, the case is closed for good. There is no retreat here. Okay, Ethiopia can't do anything it wants. Eritreans can only protect themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, the best thing would be if Ethiopia, the next government, most likely would accept this so we can live in peace. But Eritrea cannot flinch even an inch from this verdict. Yeah, unfortunate.
The EEBC responded swiftly and decisively. It rejected Ethiopia's request, making clear that its mandate was to implement, not renegotiate, the legal decision. The Commission stated, "Re-argument of the case is not permitted." It reminded both parties that the Algiers Agreement gave it no authority to review or alter its ruling. The Commission's stance was a powerful defense of the rule of law over political convenience.
But that's it. They told them the Commission doesn't have the authority. It doesn't have the mandate to revise whatever happened. So it has closed its case. Ethiopia either has to accept this or fight against the whole world. Of course, we know Trump is jiving around. He's making a lot of mistakes, violating a lot of international laws. Eventually, though, the international community will stop it, one way or another. But Ethiopia will have to be stopped by its own people too, because this has no use. It can stop Eritreans from progressing forward. But it cannot change the situation, the status quo ante. I'm talking about after the verdict was given. Eritrea will remain independent. Ethiopia will remain independent. Badema will remain under the Eritrean control forever because she is Eritrean, ladies and gentlemen, especially after the recent war in Tigray. Eritrea managed to bring its territory back to itself, that place called Badema. And the Tigrayans don't have any problem here. Right now, they know it's not the property of the Tigrayans. It's not an Ethiopian territory. So they have accepted it. They have understood that they cannot get away with any kind of excuse to violate the verdict given. They call it the Algiers Agreement. Okay, that is it. Binding and final. But Abiy is trying to survive out of that. Of course, he cannot make it. Ladies and gentlemen, we just have to clarify everything here for Ethiopians and for Ethiopians. We need to live peacefully in the future. Our strategic interest is to accept and respect the boundaries and then start life peacefully, coexisting peacefully. This is what we're trying to do. And we want the Ethiopians to understand the situation very well, because a lot of lies have been told to the Ethiopians in the past about this issue. But it has never been an issue. It is just a political dilemma to both countries. Ethiopians need to understand this.
Allowing one party to challenge a final decision would undermine the entire system of international arbitration. The EEBC's duty was not just to Ethiopia and Eritrea, but to the credibility of international justice. With the legal phase closed, the next step was clear: demarcate the border on the ground. The ball was now in the political court.
They said nothing could fix it, but wait till you see.
Refusal was the principle of, once a competent court issues a final judgment, the matter is closed. This doctrine ensures certainty and closure, preventing endless appeals and legal harassment. The Algiers Agreement's final and binding clause was the treaty's embodiment of. Ethiopia's request asked the Commission to ignore this principle and act as its own court of appeal. The EEBC's rejection was not arrogance, but a necessary defense of legal finality. In international arbitration, states only submit disputes if they trust the process will yield a definitive outcome. If final rulings can be ignored, arbitration loses its power to resolve conflicts peacefully. The EEBC's stance protected the entire architecture of international law. When nations agree to a legal process, they must live with the result. Only then can law, not force, have the final say. Ethiopia's refusal to accept the EEBC's decision had lasting consequences. Eritrea's legal victory was never implemented on the ground. Ethiopian troops remained in disputed territories, including Badme. The border pillars were never placed, and the line on the map stayed invisible. For 16 years, the two nations endured a tense, no war, no peace standoff, militarized, isolated, and locked in a frozen conflict. Eritrea insisted on full implementation of the EEBC ruling, seeing it as a matter of sovereignty and law. Ethiopia's military presence became a symbol of defiance against international arbitration. The international community repeatedly called for Ethiopia to honor its obligations, but the stalemate persisted. The EEBC eventually published the border's coordinates, unable to demarcate on the ground. The episode exposed the limits of international law when a powerful state refuses to comply. The EEBC story.
I really don't think it's because Ethiopia is strong that the ICC failed to comply with. I mean, to put it on the ground, but I wouldn't like to go there and cause problems. Of course, both countries need to agree for the demarcation. Eventually, it's going to be like that. Okay? They are demarcated anyway. Virtually, they are demarcated. We know our borders. We know where the Eritrean soldiers are at. We know where Ethiopians are. The border, the people in the borderline agree and understand about their situation equally, ladies and gentlemen, because they know their properties. Here, it is only politics. It's not about the people's issues, because the recent evolution of the whole thing is that people are now trying to just agree people to people wise without political games. And this is working. This is exactly how it is. They have no problem fighting over body. The people can just go back and forth. You understand what I'm saying? They know each other. This is not a problem. But Abiy came. He accepted it. And the whole thing was reversed. The relationship started to just move on positively. And finally, he came up. Again, said he wants to go to Assab right now, not because he wants to go to Assab, ladies and gentlemen. He knows he has no capacity to do that. He knows he cannot stand in any place in Eritrea. Staying there peacefully for 1 month or so, it would be hell for Ethiopians coming to Eritrea. Okay, you cannot stay in Eritrea in occupying it by force without having the chance of being eliminated. This is a history. But he had to bring this issue as a card to cover up his weaknesses in Ethiopia in all fields of the social life, economically, socially, politically, diplomatically. You understand what I'm saying? The guy is a criminal. The guy has done a lot of damage to that country, genocides. And to cover all this up for survival, he picked up this card. But the card came too late, at the wrong time, when everything was finished. The consciousness level of Ethiopians has gone beyond the ports for Ethiopia right now, basic survival, not the ports. And Eritreans have always been ready for Ethiopians to use their ports legally and amicably, and this is what's going to happen next time. Ethiopians and Eritreans have to be abided by this to continue life with amicable, you understand, coexistence, peaceful coexistence. This is a must for Eritreans to keep, and this is a must for Ethiopians to accept.
Is a lesson in the necessity of legal finality. Final and binding is the guarantee that makes peaceful arbitration possible.
Absolutely final and binding. Ethiopia has no exit from this verdict.
If nations can walk away from a ruling they dislike, the rule of law collapses. The Commission's refusal to reopen the case was a principled defense of trust in international agreements. Had it yielded, future arbitration would be meaningless. No state could trust the process.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I live it right here. You know, if you go, continue and look at it. You know, I mean, I just saw it here and I found it interesting to share here because it was very well presented. There is no choice for Ethiopians. They cannot exit from the verdict. Eritreans cannot exit from the verdict too. We have lost some territories, maybe. We have to accept it. They could have lost something, they were imagining of theirs, and then they have to accept it. Because the people in the boundaries have no problems. They can understand one another. If by chance an Eritrean was supposed to be a Tigrian this time, he has the choice to come back. And he can be rehabilitated, and likewise, in reverse. Therefore, I found this very interesting. We're going to the next phase of Ethiopian political life, ladies and gentlemen. Abiy is finished, as you know. It's a matter of time. He cannot dictate terms. He's just driving around to create the fight. But Ethiopians have rejected it. For the first time, Ethiopians in unison, the intellectuals have grasped reality and accepted the nationhood of Ethiopia. And likewise, we Eritreans have no problem for them to access our ports because it's legal right that we cannot stop. And at the same time, we can benefit from this in terms of many other things. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia should never have any problem, any excuse to make the ports, the Eritrean ports, accessibility, lack of accessibility as an excuse to create or to ignite unjust and falsified deceptive war between the two countries. It's about time for them now to understand. The intellectuals must come into understanding now, accept Eritrea the way it is, and use the ports probably even freely. This is the only way to go, and this is what we hope to do. This is what we hope to do collectively and what we want to see. I'll see you next time. I appreciate if you see this in my other channel, the English channel, because it will reduce, you see, the workload that I'm taking as a responsibility, of course, as an individual. And let me show you, because this is where it's going to be too. Instead of choosing to see it in this channel, why don't you go to that Eritrea Here and Now channel and watch it and make it alive, ladies and gentlemen, because we will have to communicate with English, with the world. We have to use the English language to communicate. And then we need a special channel for that. That's why I made it. So I hope you will see it again right here and go there and watch my English videos because nobody is watching them there. I don't know, maybe you are addicted to this channel or whatever. I don't understand. Oh, you're not ready to do that. Whatever it is, my job is to introduce you. And here is the channel. And I hope I will produce a lot of educational videos that can benefit all of us, not only about the region, but about the whole world. Eritrea Here and Now. It means everybody here and now. It's not necessarily about Eritrea only, but about justice everywhere. Okay? And then I'll let you go with this one. I appreciate if you develop this one, if you go there and subscribe and watch the videos, because this video is going to be there too. I love you. Have a good time.